all of this stuff will not be on your test, okay? Okay? All of this stuff will not be on your test. Okay, so this is going to be on the following or subsequent tests.
Oh, wait.
Yes, ma'am.
If we don't have the study session this afternoon, are you going to move it to Thursday?
Unfortunately, I can't because I have Scholar Bowl on Thursday. That's the only downside. I wouldn't mind having another one before school on Thursday, though, for those who didn't make this one. But I can't do after school just because I have Scholar Bowl and we have to leave immediately. But I could do another one before school, if need be. That's about all I can do. All right. Folks, if you would, again, please make sure that you put up your electronic devices, and then we'll move on. We left off last time with the Enlightenment, okay? And the Enlightenment, this period, roughly between 1600 and 1800, or 1650 and 1800, depending on the historian and his interpretation of the Enlightenment, is basically going to see a shift between supernatural explanations of the world and natural explanations of the world. So if I screamed and put a hex on Emily and then she died 2 days later, how would medieval man explain that?
You killed her.
I killed her because I'm a witch or a wizard. Okay? If the Enlightenment on, I screamed at her and then she died of a traffic accident 2 days later, what would the interpretation be?
Coincidence.
Coincidence, bad luck. They would be looking for a natural cause of a death. Okay, does that make sense? They're also going to look at the universe as a machine and during the Enlightenment. So they see that everything is logical. Everything has a telos, for instance, or a purpose. As you may remember, and so you can try to figure out the natural laws or the natural order of things. And so therefore, during the Enlightenment, you're going to have a lot of philosophers and a lot of intellectuals who are trying to explain not only what the basis of physics or science is, but also underlying principles in economics, in government, in all areas of society. So it's really going to be embracing logic and rationality in a way that you haven't seen for some time. Now, there are some basic revolutions, and we're going to spend some specific time talking about each one of these revolutions. American, probably the least of any of these, because what have you guys focused probably the most of on any revolution in your K through 12 or K through 10 American? So I'll mention it, but we're not going to go through it because this is an American history class. But the Glorious Revolution in England, the American Revolution, the French, the scientific, I might even also throw in the Industrial Revolution, are all basically born out of the Enlightenment. So in many ways, this really changes society. And just a recap, of course, the Glorious Revolution is the revolution where? In Parliament in Great Britain in 1688, which confirmed that Britain was a constitutional monarchy. Okay? Created the English Bill of Rights. The American you know of, that gave us our form of government. The French Revolution, which we will study very quickly in here, which overthrew the absolute monarchy of France in 1789 and made it a constitutional monarchy, and then by 1793 made France into a republic with no king. The Scientific Revolution, which basically created modern physics and calculus, among other things. And the Enlightenment, important Enlightenment thinkers. Voltaire is a French philosophe, famously wrote a book called Candide, that's like Candid with an E on the end. And he argued for free speech and tolerance. If you want to move society forward, you need to have a multiplicity of ideas. Adam Smith, who was a Scottish philosopher, developed capitalism, an economic system that tried to explain how the world works. So Adam Smith is the father of capitalism. Any of you know what major work he wrote that developed capitalism? Wealth of Nations. Okay? Ben Franklin, you are familiar with. He's the American. Franklin, of course, was a scientist, philosopher, printer, did a little bit of everything. But he very much was part of the American Enlightenment. Baron Montesquieu developed the 3 branches of government in his Spirit of the Laws. John Locke, my homeboy, developed social contract theory. He also tried to figure out how we learn, and the idea of tabula rasa, or blank slate theory of learning. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a French philosopher. And then finally, Jean-Jacques Rousseau also developed a form of the social contract. And last but not least, David Hume was a Scottish philosopher who basically said we need to embrace natural laws wherever they go. And one of the things he did was reject miracles. And so we'll talk about each one of these guys more specifically as we go through here. But the Enlightenment's a big deal. The first guy that we're going to take a look at is my homeboy John Locke today. Gotta love my John Locke. Locke was important for a couple of reasons, and of course, this is Locke. Everyone, I wore my tie the last time we were here, so I don't have the tie today. But this is John Locke. Unfortunately, it's not all of John Locke, but it's John Locke. You see the best part of him. His nose, his hair. He's a handsome man. If we all were just as pretty as John Locke, the world would be a happier, happier place. Anyway, John Locke was one of the fathers, if you will, of educational psychology. And he develops this debate that sometimes you hear about called nature versus nurture. And he developed what he called the tabula rasa, or blank slate theory. What does that mean, the blank slate theory? Okay, so let's say here that that Abby here is born. She's alive, she's a human being, and I am a world-class violinist. Nobody plays the violin like Brian. I am just the world's greatest violinist player. So, Abby's a poor orphan. My wife and I adopt her, and we raise her. And what do we train her from the time that she can pick up a bow at 18 months forward? To be a violinist. So, according to Locke, you enter the world as like a blank slate. The chalkboard has nothing written on it. And what does your environment do?
Shape you.
Shape you. It writes whatever needs to be on there. Okay? So according to Locke, that it's not so much your genetics, if you will. It's not your nature. It is your nurture. That is, it is the environment in which you're raised. And that has powerful ideas. For instance, if you buy Locke and this nature versus nurture thing, what does that tell you about schools, for instance? You'll become what they teach you. So, if you're a dull knife, what can the school do? Make you a sharp knife. Okay? Now, are there limits to this? What's the limit? Coal, for instance. Not coal is the limit here. But with basketball, for instance, Cole, because I see you've got the basketball warm-up and you guys are playing Hillsborough tonight, is that correct? Okay. Assuming it's still on and everything, and we don't have a massive ice, snow, rain, thunderstorm event, whatever this is going to be. Long story short, what position do you play? You play a shooting guard. How tall are you? You're 6'5". Could you play that position if you were 4'10"? If you were Bridget's size, could you play that on the basketball team?
Yeah.
Or if you were the size of one of my 7th hour students, Morgan Pullen, could you play that position? Probably not. So would it matter? What if Michael Jordan and LeBron James had adopted you as children and taught you every day? Would it matter?
Probably
Probably not. Why not? Because it's, it has to do a little bit with the environment, with not just the environment, but just the genetics that you bring to the table. If you're not tall, you're going to have a hard time succeeding at basketball at a competitive level. Well, are there other areas where that might be besides sports? This is always kind of an argument that people have. Your brain. Okay? Is your success, just out of curiosity in here? Oh, I don't want to do this because this will embarrass some folks. But when you look at the folks who are college bound, a lot of times what do you notice about the folks who are college bound at the high school? Their parents were attended college.
My mom dropped out of
But but she still attended it. And my point is, sometimes it's your environment, and sometimes it's your genes, and sometimes it's a mix of the two put together. And it's really hard to separate that. Locke came firmly on the blank slate. He said we could create you in any way, if society could create you any way that you wanted to be. And I think there are some real limits to that, but it's very important. His ideas were very important to educational psychology. Ideas that schools can make you into a better person. That's where character education comes from. Or they could make you into work. They could cause you to want a jewel, for instance. They're, could cause you to do all sorts of things.
Addiction's not.
I guess addiction's not pretty, is it? Is it, Alex? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
My brother Jules, so
So does my brother. High
it's
five.
in the family.
So the family.
He opens his door and like a thick ball
David has
pulls
to do
out.
it in his room or on the back patio.
Well, at least he has his boundaries.
Yeah, except by Jason Jim himself.
All right. Governmental ideas. This is really the area of John Locke where I'm really the most happy. He's writing in the wake of what major revolution? He influences the American Revolution, although he's dead, but it's the Glorious Revolution. He's writing about the Glorious Revolution in England and trying to justify what had happened with it. And so he basically is coming a part of this as the acorn analogy. How he's going to explain the social contract. And what's the social contract? Well, he believes, does John Locke, that government isn't anything that's sacred or divine. He's going to say that there's nothing particularly holy, there's nothing particularly divine about government. What he's going to say instead is that there is a social contract, just like a renter's agreement, if you will, between the people who govern, the government, and its citizens. And they each have rights and obligations. And if either party voids that, then the deal's off, the gig's up. All right, so let's see, we are missing Maria today as well, is that right? She's sick. And we're missing Cody, and we're missing Kat today.
Where's Cody?
And
I miss Kat.
And Susan, that's right.
I'm representing.
It's the Trinity, it's gone. Okay? Alright, social contract theory and acorn analogy. Okay, let's spend a little time right now talking about his idea of government. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you would, bear with me for just a minute. We're going to talk about how he believes government starts with. Where does government come with?
You got the second.
Just for you.
Hello, boys and girls. How are we today? Are we good? Is it a beautiful day at FHS today?
Is it ever?
Until 3 p.m. Well, then there'll be ice and snow and rain and thunderstorms. Is it a beautiful day in the neighborhood? Well, today we're going to talk about John Locke's acorn analogy, why he explains why we have government, boys and girls. So, this is what John Locke says. Step number 1. He says, pretend, boys and girls, that's you. Pretend that you're squirrels living in a forest. You're a squirrel. You're living in a forest. Squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. Forest, forest, forest. What do squirrels love more than anything else?
Acorns.
They love acorn nuts. They love their acorn nuts, and we're living, there's no government. That is, there's no restrictions. Cole is getting as many acorn nuts as he wants. Bridget is getting all the acorn nuts that she wants. Even Emma is getting all the acorn nuts that she wants. We're all getting our acorn nuts, and we're hiding them in our squirrel nests. Love those acorns. Now, one day, we all move around. We're moving, we're moving, we're moving, we're moving. We're finding our nuts. And then all of a sudden, we get a squirrel message. Squeakity squeak squeak. Squeakity squeak squeak. And we find out that Natasha is going to have a squirrel party at her oak tree. So we go to Natasha's squirrel party. It's BYOA, bring your own acorns. We bring some acorns over there, we have a good time, everything's fine, and then Jenna goes back. And Jenna goes back to her oak tree and she says, squeakity squeak squeak, somebody's stolen my acorns! Then Bridget goes, squeakity squeak squeak, somebody's stolen my acorns! Then Caitlin goes, squeakity squeak squeak, somebody's stolen my acorns! Everyone's acorns are stolen. So pretty soon then, Alex says, let's gather together, squirrels. We gotta form us some law, and we gotta form us some order. Dunk dunk. So then what happens is that we go meet boys and girls at Alex's tree. And Alex says, squeaky squeak squeak, if you all give me 5 acorns a week and promise to be back in your squirrel nest by midnight every night, I will make sure that none of your acorns get stolen. And what do we all do?
Okay.
We all say, okay. And we all give him 5 acorns a week. But then guess what happens? Our acorns get stolen. So what do we do to Alex?
We kill him.
We do not kill him. What do? We fire him because he has violated the social contract, right? Did he protect our nuts or our acorn nuts? He did not protect our acorn nuts. So who do we have in place now? What?
Abby.
We have Abby.
That's what I thought. This Abby, right here.
She's going to, so we're going to give her 5 acorn nuts a week to protect our acorns. But what if she doesn't do it?
We kill her.
No, we don't kill her. Oh, we're so bloodthirsty. We fire her.
Nothing else happens.
And then we have Emma. And she's going to protect us. And what if she doesn't protect us?
We kill her.
No!
Stop.
Hannah, we don't kill. This is a social contract. Okay.
I'm out of here.
Okay. So you see how this works. So, boys and girls, going back to my Fred Rogers voice here, which I deviated from. What's the purpose of government in the acorn analogy? It's what's the whole purpose of government? To protect private property.
Okay.
The whole point of government, boys and girls, is to protect private property. Okay, that's the point of the analogy. So, what's the sole purpose of government? Is it to make sure that you have pretty highways? No. Is it to make sure that we have professional football teams? No. What is it? It's to protect your private property. And what if the government doesn't protect your private property? You don't kill it. What do you do? What do you do? You fire it and you start new. Now, there are some assumptions that John Locke makes here. And what are the assumptions that John Locke makes? So again, for Locke, what's the purpose of government? To protect private property, as represented by the acorn nuts here. Now, you might say, well, please, I don't... Oh my gosh, it is. It looks like I've got a laser. It is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. I appreciate that. Otherwise, I would have ran my battery down and it would have looked odd all day long. Oh my gosh, it burned a laser hole through my... It's incredible. Okay, so what are the assumptions that John Locke makes? Locke's going to make some assumptions. So, he's going to assume, first of all, that everybody has property. Everybody has property. Now, let's take, for example, Cody, because Cody's not here.
Yeah, let's pick up.
Okay, what if Cody actually has no property? What if Cody is just like naked as a jaybird? He doesn't even have a shirt on his back. He doesn't have a book bag. He doesn't have a phone. He doesn't have anything.
That's why he's not here.
That's why he's not here,
You gotta
actually.
sit down.
Yeah, because we require that you have clothes here at Farmington High School. But does he have property according to Locke?
Yes.
Abby, stop.
Yes, he does. Because even if he's living in the proverbial van down by the river with nothing in a cardboard box, what is he able to do? How? Because what does he have even though he has no clothes? He has nothing.
He's gonna get a job with no clothes on.
He has his mind and his voice.
He has his mind and his voice. Yeah,
I think.
his mind and his voice, so he can
Is
sing!
that the right answer?
Is there anything else that he has? What else does he have?
A box.
His body.
Okay?
His body.
He's got his body. And what can he do with his body?
And
He can dance. He
Hannah, you said prostitution?
Oh my God.
You said sell it?
I'm telling Michelle.
She said prostitution. Oh my gosh, wash her mouth out with soap.
Did she say something?
We need hat. We need hat.
Yes, Farmington's most...
First prostitute.
That's right.
Hat rack.
Oh.
Ah, yes. Well, anyway.
There was a prostitute named Hat Rack.
There was a prostitute named Cooter, and that's why we have Cooter, Missouri.
That one.
I love that story.
I'm just so glad to know all these things. Okay, anyway, folks, back on track here. What Cody can do is he can sell his labor. And the whole point that Locke has is everyone basically has property because they have their own body. And as Melissa said, you could use your voice, your mind, your body, depending on the type of work that you do. He's not talking, Hannah, about prostitution. What he's talking about is labor. And think about how your parents, or perhaps you, make money.
Oh, porn soups all day.
If you're working at Panera, you're pouring soup.
Me too.
What I'm doing is I sell 190 days of my life each year to the Farmington R7 school district.
I'm so sorry.
That's what we do. I mean, you sell labor that way. So he says everybody's got that. So this isn't just for the wealthy who've got homes or mansions or BMWs or whatever.
Did this apply to women?
For him, not so much, because women didn't have rights at this time. Sorry. Today we would apply it to women. So his first assumption is that everyone's got property. His second assumption is that property is necessary for liberty. Property is necessary for liberty. Because let's face it, if you don't have property, if you don't have private property, Locke says there's no way that you can have liberty or be free. Why is that? Well, if you don't have the means to feed yourself, if you don't have the means to supply your family's basic needs, what kind of life are you going to have? Yeah, you're going to have a pretty bad life. So he says, you've got to have this basic freedom. You've got to have the ability to have property. So he says freedom is necessary. Private property is necessary for liberty or necessary for freedom. Third assumption that he makes is that there's nothing sacred about government. There's absolutely nothing sacred about government. Now, that was pretty controversial at the time. Because how had most kings justified their rule? Divine right. And he's like, nah, what's the purpose of government? To protect your private property. It's not that a king said that you're holy or that you're awesome. What it is the king basically, if a king or any type of government doesn't protect your property, you just fire them. You get rid of them. Okay? And this is going to be incredibly influential. He justifies the firing of James II and the Glorious Revolution in England in 1688. But then this is going to be used in the United States by Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and James Madison and Alexander Hamilton to justify the American Revolution. Because if you remember, what was one of the key slogans of the American Revolution? No taxation without representation. Very good. Okay? And because the government of Britain was basically taking the colonists' property without their consent, that was going to be it. One of the other assumptions that Locke makes, and this is one of the more controversial ones for Locke, this is going to be the notion that taxes are a voluntary gift. A voluntary gift. And you might say, I don't think that's right, Reeves. I don't think taxes are a voluntary gift. But keep in mind, for Locke, what is it that in our government today, what's the branch of government that raises taxes or can raise taxes? It's Congress. Congress, and it starts in the House of Representatives. How often are members of the House of Representatives elected? Every 2 years. It's the most frequently elected branch of government. So, at the federal level. So in that sense, because the majority of people elect the House of Representatives, that's where we would say it is, people agree with this. So you understand Locke's influence on the American Revolution. You see why he's so important. And this is a social contract. Make sense? You got Locke? Okay. Again, there is Locke. Now, we're going to talk about René Descartes here for a minute. René Descartes. If there's one original father of the Enlightenment, or as all the boys and girls say today, the OG of the Enlightenment today, it would be René Descartes. René Descartes was a Frenchman, and isn't he a handsome man? Not quite as handsome as John Locke. I do like the mustache too. Locke needed a mustache. He needed a goatee. It would have been so much better. Okay. Because everybody looks better with facial hair. Okay? Now, René Descartes. Let's talk about him a little bit. He is a Frenchman. He writes famously a book called Discourses on Method. You may know him from geometry class. He's the one who creates the Cartesian coordinates, the Cartesian planes. You don't like him? So he was a mathematician and a philosopher. But he's going to be important in developing a couple of key things. He famously is concerned with how we come to knowledge. He forms a branch of philosophy, or rejuvenates a branch of philosophy called epistemology. And what epistemology is, you may remember this from last semester, is the study of theory and knowledge, study of theory of how we get to truth and knowledge. He said, there's a problem that we have. How do I know? Have you guys ever seen the movie The Matrix with my cousin Keanu Reeves? Yes. Can't you tell? I'll just put my profile up here. Can't you see? Yeah, just assume. Yeah. Well, what's the whole mind-blowing thing of The Matrix other than my cousin Keanu's in it? Have you seen it?
Dodging bullets.
They're dodging bullets, that's true. With trench coats. What else?
The glasses.
Well, they do have cool glasses.
I've never seen it.
You've never seen it. Well, the whole idea in that is Keanu Reeves's character, Neo, thinks that he's living in a real world. But what is he? What is every human being? This is sci-fi 90s classic. They're hooked up to a big machine. Okay? And they're all just basically humans or nothing more than batteries in this, but they think that they're actually out in the world, but they're not. Descartes would kind of say, okay, how do I know what my senses are perceiving are real? How do I know, Aristotle, the old Greek philosopher, because of the idea of the correspondence theory of truth, would say, how do I know that this Yeti is black? Because I look at it and it is black. That everything that I see corresponds. Okay? But Descartes says, how can we know that's real? Because, you may taste chocolate and think it's sweet, and you may taste it and think it's bitter. There can be differences. How do we know what that is? Well, Descartes said there's one thing as a human being that I know. And that is that I know that I doubt things. That's all I know. And so, how do I know that I exist? Well, I know that I exist because I have doubt. And the crucible to get at truth for Rene Descartes is doubt. All I know is doubt. And he famously coined the phrase, I think, therefore I am. What's the one thing that will ensure or make sure that I know that I exist? I know that I exist because I think, I doubt things. Therefore, what is going to be the lens through which we view all issues and all problems for Descartes and subsequent Enlightenment thinkers? It's going to be doubt and skepticism. Now, it's not going to be skepticism in the sense that I can never believe anything, but I'm always going to question the validity, the truthfulness of something. And isn't that what science is all about, really? You're going to question the assumptions that we make. And so he's really important, and that's why he's kind of the father of the Enlightenment, because he's going to say, we need to focus on this. Now, we need to focus on doubt. Now, one of the other things that he's going to do, Western thought, as you know, what was the Reformation period that we studied largely about? As far as time frame, yes, but what subject was it about a lot? What were they really focused on? Religion, yeah. Rene Descartes is not an atheist, okay? But he's going to say, why worry about religion? Can you prove what heaven's like? Can you prove what any of religious ideas are? No. I don't know that, I'm not saying that none of that doesn't exist, but can you observe it in the world? Can you study it? You can't. So therefore, don't worry about it. Rene Descartes pretty much starts this cord cutting, if you will, of worrying about metaphysics or supernatural kind of things. Again, remember the basic definition of the Enlightenment? And what was that? What do they focus on? What kind of world? The natural world, not the supernatural or metaphysics, things beyond physics. Okay? So he's going to focus just on the here and now. And why is that so significant? What do we focus on more than anything else, really, since the Enlightenment? The material world, right? We don't really focus as much on spirituality as they did before this time. Okay? So he really makes that as a difference. He also is the guy who says the universe, and starts down this path, is nothing more than a machine. And if it's a machine, what is he able to do? What's that? Yeah. There are laws, there are laws that we can figure out how a machine operates. And we have the capacity as rational beings to figure out how that machine operates. So that's going to start us down a path of looking at what he called, and other Enlightenment philosophers called, natural laws. So if I take this book and I drop it 100 times, what's going to happen? It's going to drop. And what do we call this thing? Gravity. Yeah. And who discovered gravity who was a contemporary? Isaac Newton. You see, there's a reason why Newton starts writing about this a little bit after Descartes. People are starting to say, hey, we need to focus on these kinds of things. Now, he was a French mathematician and philosopher, and he was really had a little conflict with one of his contemporaries, Blaise Pascal. Blaise Pascal was also a French mathematician and philosopher, except Blaise Pascal was a devout Catholic. Have you ever heard of Pascal's triangle? That's this guy. Okay? No, sorry. So Blaise Pascal writes a book of sayings, and he's a really strong devout Catholic. And he writes too bad Cody and Maria aren't here today to talk about this. But one of the things that Blaise Pascal says, look, Rene Descartes says the most important part, the defining element of Hannah being a human, or Jillian being a human, or Melissa or Jenna being a human, or even Alex being a human, is the notion that you are rational. When do you feel most alive? When you are doing math and being logical, or you're listening to your favorite song? You don't know. When do you feel most alive? Hannah, when you're
Those two choices.
out of those two choices, when you're listening to your favorite
When
song,
I'm singing, of course.
when you're singing, right? How about you? Listening to your favorite song, Alex?
Playing tennis.
Shut up.
Playing tennis is when you feel
Yeah.
most alive. Okay? Why not when you're doing math?
Because math
Who's
is
judging you?
and it makes me think too much, and it's not fun.
Because Jane makes me cry.
Yeah, she has
Math,
both
math, put it
times.
up.
I don't like it.
What do you think? Music? Anyone say math?
Put your hands down.
Anyone say, you say math. Emma says math makes her feel most alive.
Jane must
That-
like her.
Depends on what type of math.
Jane must like her. Addition. It doesn't know what.
It's like algebra.
1, 2, 3.
Like when I do algebra, it's like,
Okay.
I'm glad.
The long and the short of this, folks, is that Pascal is going to say what it is that makes us feel alive is our feelings and our emotions. It's art and relationships that make us feel alive. That's what makes us human. It's not logic. It's not rationality. He says, rationality is a big thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-rationality. But if you define all that matters is that all that matters is what is rational, then you are throwing away a multiplicity of things that define us as human beings. But really, I think if you boil this down today, you will see that Descartes won that argument. Because if you go to a university, and many of you will, if not all of you, will go to a university in the next few years, what majors are the most highly regarded? Not art majors.
STEM. Yeah, it's STEM. If you're not good at that, science,
Yes.
technology, engineering, and math.
STEM, right? So let's say,
Well, yeah, I don't want to STEM.
you don't want to go into STEM. Okay, so
Absolutely.
let's say Abby is going to be a history major. Is that going to be highly regarded?
No.
No. No, let's say Emma is a math major. Is that going to be highly regarded?
Yes.
Yes. Let's say Katie is going to be a theater major. Is that going to be highly regarded?
No.
No. Let's say that Jenna is going to be a physics major. Is that highly?
Oh,
Yes.
Yes. Let's say that Natasha is going to be an engineer. Is that going to be highly regarded?
Yes.
Okay. That's basically the world that has come out of this debate between Pascal. Everything's STEM. Now, I'm not anti-STEM here, and please don't take this discussion that STEM's bad. But I do think, historically, when you look at it, there is also some value to the arts, to humanities. I mean, I think I do think all of you said that the song is music are what makes you feel alive, and that's quite. I think there's some reality to that. All right. Let's talk, the last thing that we're really going to be taking a look at, you see this question over here. What is deism? Okay, I'm going to spend a little bit of class period today discussing what deism is. And deism was the religious idea, if you will, of the intellectual elites during the Enlightenment. Now folks, if you went to the countryside or the common people in cities or towns, the middle class and the working class would not be deists, okay? This is only kind of like the upper crust elites, okay? And this isn't all of them, okay? It's just kind of the elites of society here. But let me explain deism. The root of deism comes from deity, meaning that, dealing with God. But their idea of religion is going to be a lot different. And the best way to explain it is the watchmaker analogy. Now this lovely Bulova watch, my wife gave to me on our 25th wedding anniversary. And it is... So there was a watchmaker, bless you, in Japan, bless you again, who made this, okay? It was then put in a box with an owner's manual, shipped to some store in the United States where my wife bought it and then gave to me on our anniversary last year. So I have this watch, and what I like to do, in following with this watchmaker analogy, is about every twice a week, Sundays and Mondays, I get together with other Bulova watch owners, and we sing our favorite Bulova watch hymns to each other. We rotate through, and somebody gets up and gives about a 20-minute address about why Bulova watches are superior to all other watches. And we all sit and listen, and we'll pass around a collection plate, and it's a very nice time. We all get together and bond. Occasionally we'll have a fellowship meal together in which we talk about Bulova watches. Then one day, I'm sitting here in class, and my watch band breaks and falls off, and Natasha is walking by, and she steps on my watch, and actually hops on it 5 times, shattering it into 1,000 little jagged pieces. And then what I do is I collect them. I get on my phone, I call the Bulova watchmaker and say, my friends who commune with me at the Bulova watch community here in Farmington, and we get together. We hold hands, we pray to the great Japanese watchmaker and say, "Great Japanese watchmaker, suspend the space-time continuum, come here, fix my watch." And we wait, and we wait, and we wait. Does the Japanese watchmaker miraculously appear or wave his hands and fix my watch?
No.
Never does. Okay? What is the Japanese watchmaker doing? Making more watches. Very good. Which is exactly what deist thinkers like Thomas Jefferson said. They said that there was a God, and that God was the unmoved mover. That is, God was the first cause of all things. Okay? And then what happened? Well, God continues to create other universes and other things, just like the Japanese watchmaker makes all of these things. Who set up all of the natural laws like gravity and what have you, that we study in physics? God, the creator. Would it be logical for God, the creator, to then intervene in the space-time continuum whenever we have a need like the watch being broken? They would say, no, it's not. So the deists basically denied intercessory prayer. They said that there is a God, but that God really doesn't care about you personally. And so if it makes you feel good, you can pray to that God, but is that God going to respond to you? No, because the God's a creator, sets up the rules of the universe, and then creates more universes. Okay? Just like the Japanese watchmaker is making more Bulova watches. Now, you might say, well, Reeves, what's the whole point of you telling me about this? Well, keep in mind that these are some elite thinkers during the Enlightenment who are deists. There were plenty of people during this time period who were still conventional Christians, okay, and believed in intercessory prayer and traditional forms of Protestant and Catholic Christianity. However, these guys were pretty influential. Famous deists in the United States included Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. In fact, Thomas Jefferson basically took the gospel, and he liked Jesus, but he saw Jesus, did Thomas Jefferson, as kind of like a Jewish Socrates. You know, a really good guy. And he translated the Gospel of John, but took out all of the miracles. And at the end, you know, Jesus is put in the tomb, the rocks rolled up, the end. And yeah, which really kind of changes the Christian narrative if you take all of the miracles out and, you know, yeah. And the point that I'm trying to make with this is not that you think that all of the founding fathers were deists, and, you know, John Adams, for instance, was not a deist, so certainly they all weren't. But it's the idea that, you know, the Enlightenment stressed what? Natural law, natural order, not supernatural, and the deists were just a version of this in religion. They saw everything as logical, they saw everything as rational, and that's kind of where they were coming from. This was kind of like the Enlightenment philosopher view of religion. Now keep in mind, if you went to small towns in America or Europe, would the average person on the street be a deist? No, not at all, okay? This was only kind of for more of the elites. And in America, for instance, there was kind of the antithesis or opposite of this going on with the First Great Awakening. So obviously this isn't everybody in society, but there are famous examples in our country. In Europe, there were famous examples of deists like Voltaire as well. We're going to talk more about the Enlightenment. On Thursday, we're going to look at Adam Smith and the development of capitalism and a few other things. But any questions about what we covered today? Also want to mention to you that if you have not uploaded your paper yet, it is open, so please do upload that paper, because I know there was the fiasco with Trinidad being down. And I know, I think I have about 100 emails from students over this break. So